Dr. Joseph Martin here. Bipolarity, the universe, human nature, and mental health. I'd like to start and say that the entire universe is bipolar. And we're seeing this in terms of physics and the laws of physics and the structure of the universe and the structure of the human body and the human psyche. The universe has expansion capacities and compression capacities. All stars and galaxies, they are compressed and then they expand and go through many stages of evolution of compression and expansion. Everything in the universe is bi-rhythmic. Everything has a rhythm of going in and going out. For instance, our lungs, we breathe in the air and expand, and then we breathe out the air and we compress. Everything is bipolar and everything is dyadic, meaning just take human nature now, there are two sides to the brain. One's for thoughts and cognition, and one's for feelings and emotions. And every 45 minutes, they switch from predominance of electromagnetivity from one side of the brain to the other. We have two eyes, two ears, two nostrils, two arms and legs, and so on. Everything is dyadic and structured that way. And everything is cyclical. So when we're looking at bipolarity, we have to realize it's a structural thing as well as a functional thing. And if we just go to the level of societies, and as an anthropologist, I'm making a major study of the bipolarity of societies, the way they're structured, between things that have to be in control and things where individuals want and choose freedom. So the higher organizational institutions always need to have control and firm structure, and yet the function or the flow of individuals within the society is often curtailed, and therefore we have revolutions over and over and over again. They're fighting the overwhelming control and domination of the rigid structures. This is the bipolarity of societies, institutions, cultures, and civilizations. From time immemorial, we have gone through all the civilizations and present-day nation-states and can point this out. Otherwise, how could it make sense that a whole society would build up its institutions and its buildings and churches and temples and businesses and homes and parks, and then every 80 years decide they're going to bomb them and destroy everything, and as we did in the First War, and then again in the Second War, and then the Korean, and the Vietnam War, and then on and on and on. So this shows us something about human nature. If humans are capable of the creative impulse and the passion to build and create a culture and societies and beauty and buildings, and then perhaps we obviously were consciously doing that, and then unconsciously or perhaps insanely, somewhat consciously, destroy it all with bombs and destroy the buildings, destroy the people's lives, kill them, and destroy their psyches so they have post-traumatic stress syndrome, whether or not they were the military who did this or the civilians who were left to wander aimlessly in shock on their own, wandering from one camp to another, as we have in all the continents today of the planet, and even in Europe, where there's lots of people without work and money and homes. What does this tell us about ourselves as bipolar societies and the human species? The fact that we have hope and passion and want to create, and then we have, on the other hand, the bipolar side of it, the hatred and creating enemies and wanting to destroy and destroy and destroy. And then we have to start all over again, and then we do that cycle all over again. Everything is bipolar. You remember from your high school science that magnets are bipolar. There's the North Pole and the South Pole in a magnet. Our planet and every other planet in our solar system has a North Pole and a South Pole. And there's seasonal cycles to the weather. In the wintertime, there's low lights and people get SAD. loss of light. And in the cycles again of the summer times, when we have growth and expansion of the plants and the trees and the animals coming back again. And then in the winter, all this dies. So you see, it's even a cycle within nature, that there is birth, death, and then rebirth again. In fact, it's the most pervasive archetypal reality, this one of birth, death, and rebirth, as well pointed out by all the great mythologists, including Joseph Campbell. So as we get down to the mental health issues about bipolarity, as somewhat defined and judged by the psychiatric institutions as a clinical illness, and the word illness itself is inappropriate. Everyone on the planet is bipolar. It's your physiology, your electrophysiology, it's your anatomy, it's what happens in the diurnal biochemical changes, what happens when you're sleeping at night, and then the biochemical changes and the electrophysiological changes when you're awake and walking around and working during the day. Everything about our life is bipolar. It does no good to judge someone as being bipolar just because they think there's something wrong with it. In fact, it just is. We need to understand it more clearly, and in understanding it and without judgment, knowing how we can help ourselves with this. The present day system, the medical system, considers itself that it's a clinical mental illness where there's a depressed side where people can be clinically or chronically depressed or sometimes situationally depressed, and then the opposite would be the manic or the mania side when people just go semi-psychotic and are needing to be restrained and put into psychiatric care in hospitals or given lots of drug treatments to take away the symptoms but never cure the underlying challenges here. So bipolarity is simply the way it is for all human beings, and we all can tend to go through those phases. There is no such thing as normalcy where there is no change and you have a perfectly balance in the middle. That would be typically known as apathy or boredom or just the inability to feel or think anything. We all have strong feelings one way or the other, and when things aren't going particularly well for us, we tend to get depressed and we repress our energies and our emotions. Everyone knows the symptoms of the depression side of this, either losing weight and not eating, or eating too much and putting on a lot of weight, anxiety, worry, mental confusion, insomnia, the inability to communicate, emotionally shutting down, and physiologically just being inert, incapacitated. Those are all the signs of the repression or compression of emotion and energy. And of course, everything is energy. When the lid is taken off through whatever changes are going on biochemically, people can go manic. They have much more kind of ecstatic, outward expressive activities of physical actions and mental actions and verbal actions, and often these are not held to be suitable in societies, and so they are put away and taken care of. In some cases, it's allowed for some people to still act this way and get away with it, as in the case recently worldwide of certain people who are in political positions in metropolitan areas or civic politics, or even in national politics. So, what are we going to do with this knowledge of bipolarity? Well, we need to understand the causes of this. Now, the present system being focused mostly on genetics. Yes, there obviously is some genetic or DNA component in the family lineage and a cultural, national, ethnic lineage as well, but we can't just say it's genetic. There are social conditions and cultural conditions and religious worldviews and ethos that either compress people's feelings and sense of freedom or not. It all resolves itself around the need to lie to get by in society. most cultures in the world we know as anthropologists, and I won't mention any because I would say all societies and all nation states in the present time, in the 21st century, rely on lies and deception, and even as far as criminal activity and coercion of people within their nation state and also people within other nation states to try to fool and inveigle and to dismiss or be overly competitive or to extract online through viruses in computers, military information, and so on and so on, and all the recent examinations and things that are coming out with the particular um, national investigation institutions such as the NSA and say CSIS, which are now in looking at everybody's, invading everybody's privacy online. This kind of deception and kind of two-sidedness, the Janus face of the bipolarity that we mentioned that is part of society and also within individuals. When there are lies and deception, people have no other recourse but to become either and or both at the same time manic and depressive. Nobody likes being lied to, and nobody likes being deceived. And when you feel that you have been such and you haven't taken charge of yourself, you become a victim. And in this victim archetypal mentality, which most of the people in the world are still in at this point, you become depressed, you feel inert, you're feeling helpless, low self-worth, incapable of doing anything for yourself and making any kind of self-statement to change what's being done to you. That would be the depressed side. Every once in a while, when the lid comes off the hidden anger and sadness and fear in the volcano inside, the psyche of the individual or the psyche of the nation state, and the nation state level, they just start bombing people and going to war when the volcano comes out. That's the manic side of a nation state. Blame the other group or other race or religion or nation and just in a manic way trying to use spin doctoring and saying this is the sane and right thing to do, the nation becomes manic. And individuals do the same. Suicide bombers, people who shoot up with guns in their high schools, and on and on. And individuals, just in their attempt to be free, have a sense of personal freedom, will often go into the manic phase and try to act and be in charge of themselves and to posit and to assume some sense of self-charge in a positive way, to take responsibility for themselves and to champion themselves. Often, of course, they are sedated and taken into psychiatric care. Other causes for this are wars and post-traumatic stress syndrome from any kinds of actions or activities or accidents, loss of job, loss of money, loss of relationship. All these are potential causes for both depression and manic phases within individuals. Rape, incest, abuse, and so on, again, are causes mostly for the depression and the suicidal tendencies in individuals. And I would say that nation states can be raped as well, and civilians within various nation states can show and exhibit all the symptoms of rape that I've been very careful to use in my clinical work for over 40 years in working with incest survivors. And as a medical anthropologist, psychological anthropologist, I'm aware that many of the citizens in almost all the nation states of the world exhibit symptoms of rape because either their national government is symbolically raping or taking away their power, because rape is about taking away power. That's what rape means on the most important causal level. And so nation state civilians can go into depression and choose not to vote or take any interest in politics and just give up and allow the governments to do whatever they choose. And then On the other side, you could say that the people like Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi or Nelson Mandela, who went into a very active phase, and we won't call it manic, we'll just say freedom people, truth tellers, truth speakers who want to make a positive change. They do want to speak up and use their voice and use their heart and their power. We won't label this manic, we'll just say it's freedom and needing to take action within individuals and groups, such as the Civil Rights March in the 1960s and all the benefits of that, and women's liberation and GLBT liberation and so on. So you see inherent in the structure and function of the universe and of societies and cultures and of human psyches and human nature, we have these inherent structures. We need to understand them from these multiple points of view and not judge them and not blame them, and certainly look at the symptoms, but understand that we need to create some balance and harmony between the two sides. This is not only the case within the individual who's feeling the challenge between depression and wanting to speak up for oneself, but also in ethnic groups, in women's groups, in colored groups, in GLBT, and in nation states, to try to find some balance and harmony in life. And certainly between all and among all the nation states in the United Nations, to find some harmony and balance of the two sides, to listen to the two sides, to understand the two sides, not just to project and say one side is right or the other side is wrong, but to understand both sides. And as Einstein once most eloquently spoke of the truth of the way things are structured in the universe and in human society, the solution to problems between two sides, however you see the two sides, is never on the same logical level as the discussion of the two sides of opposition, separation, and sectarianism. The solution is always higher on a meta level of a higher consciousness, a higher understanding, which is both logical and cognitive, and emotional and intuitive. Of the solution can only be when we combine the two sides and see them as complementary, acknowledge them, and take them to a higher wholeness and unity. And that's what we can do within the human personality and psyche in terms of mental health, what we can do in terms of social interactions between different cultures, nations, and religions. And we can do this, and we will do this, just as the universe does this with the stars and the galaxies. So I wish you well and inspire you to think about this, reflect on it, and write about it. In our IamSelfworth.com upcoming online self-training, self-coaching program, you'll be able to read more and hear more and do more with all these wonderful concepts that actually do reflect the way things are structured in the universe, societies, and in our own human nature. Namaste. Take care. Dr. Joseph Martin.